For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a night in 2002, 28-year-old Raina Whitcomb began her post-shift walk near the Main Street Pier approach in Daytona Beach, Florida. She never returned. Despite an extensive search by authorities and loved ones, Raina vanished without a trace after her sandals were found beneath a bench following a squall. For 16 agonizing years, her family lived with the crushing weight of unanswered questions, clinging to slivers of hope and battling gnawing despair. Then in 2018, amidst the debris of a hurricane cleanup, a discovery was made. A sand-caked heart locket, tangled in seaweed, hinting at a long-buried secret. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Raina Whitcomb. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. Daytona Beach, Florida in the summer of 2002 pulsed with its familiar, vibrant rhythm. The Main Street Pier approach, a nexus of entertainment and ocean views, buzzed with the laughter of vacationers and the steady hum of local life. Beneath a perpetually blue sky, the boardwalk stretched, a wooden artery connecting the city to the vast Atlantic. This was a place of routine and predictability for many, a postcard of coastal Americana. Among those who navigated these familiar streets was Raina Whitcomb, a 28-year-old ER nurse whose life was defined by dedication and a quiet professionalism. Her days were spent in the demanding environment of the emergency room, a place where critical decisions were made in moments, and human vulnerability was a constant presence. Off-duty, Raina sought the calming expanse of the ocean, often concluding her intense shifts with a walk along the very boardwalk that anchored Daytona Beach's public life. It was a ritual, a way to decompress and transition from the high-stakes world of medicine to the relative serenity of her personal hours. On the evening of August 14, 2002, Raina followed this well-worn path. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand as she strolled, the sound of the waves a gentle counterpoint to the distant chatter from the pier. Her shift had ended, and the walk was a familiar unwinding, a quiet moment of reflection before returning home. The air, initially still and warm, held a subtle change, a hint of something gathering offshore. Without warning, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. A sudden squall, common to Florida's humid summers, descended upon the coast. The sky, minutes earlier a canvas of deepening twilight hues, turned an ominous gray-green. Rain lashed down, driven by an abrupt, fierce wind, scattering beachgoers and emptying the boardwalk in a matter of minutes. The lively pier approach was transformed into a desolate, rain-swept expanse, the ocean churning violently against the shore. As quickly as it arrived, the squall passed, leaving behind an eerie quiet. The wind abated, and the rain softened to a drizzle, revealing a landscape altered by the storm's brief fury. It was in this aftermath, as the first tentative figures emerged to assess the impact, that a chilling discovery was made. Beneath a weathered wooden bench, positioned perfectly as if intentionally placed, lay a pair of women's sandals. They were simple, beige, and undeniably Raina Whitcomb's. Her belongings, including her small purse, were nowhere to be found, but the sandals remained, a stark, unsettling marker. The immediate realization was profound and deeply alarming. Raina was gone, her quiet ritual abruptly interrupted, leaving only her footwear as a silent testament to an unexplained absence. The discovery of Raina Whitcomb's sandals triggered an immediate and urgent response. Within minutes, patrol units converged on the Main Street Pier approach, their flashing lights cutting through the lingering dusk and the damp aftermath of the squall. The area around the bench, where the beige footwear lay, was quickly cordoned off, transforming a public recreational space into a burgeoning crime scene. Investigators arrived, their initial assessment grim. The neatly placed sandals suggested something other than a simple accidental loss, hinting at a deliberate act or an abrupt, unforeseen event. Early search efforts commenced with a frantic intensity. Law enforcement personnel, bolstered by volunteers, fanned out across the beach, their flashlights sweeping arcs across the wet sand, searching for any sign of Raina or a struggle. The pier itself was meticulously examined, every shadow and recess scrutinized. Marine units were dispatched, their boats cutting through the choppy waters just offshore, dragging sonar equipment in a desperate attempt to locate a body. The squall, initially seen as a factor in her disappearance, now complicated the search, its turbulent currents potentially carrying evidence far afield. Detectives began interviewing anyone who had been in the vicinity before or during the squall. Among the key witnesses was Tito Serrano, a bartender at a nearby establishment, who recalled seeing Raina walking alone on the boardwalk shortly before the storm hit. His account offered little beyond confirmation of her routine, painting a picture of an unremarkable evening. No one reported seeing her with another person, no unusual vehicles were noted, and no cries for help had been heard above the sudden roar of the wind and rain. The immediate challenge became starkly apparent. Beyond the sandals, there was a profound absence of evidence. No signs of a struggle marred the sand, no personal effects were scattered, and no clear direction of travel could be ascertained. As hours bled into days, the initial hypotheses began to solidify, yet none carried definitive weight. Investigators grappled with the possibility of an accidental drowning, theorizing Raina might have been swept into the ocean by the unexpected ferocity of the squall. However, the discovery of her sandals, neatly placed, contradicted this theory, suggesting an intentional act. Abduction was another terrifying prospect, but the lack of a struggle left no physical trail. A voluntary disappearance, while considered, seemed out of character for the dedicated nurse and offered no explanation for the left-behind footwear. Each theory emerged with little concrete evidence to support it, creating a frustrating impasse. For Raina's family, the initial hours and days were an agonizing descent into an unknown future, marked by a chilling silence and the devastating realization that their daughter, sister, and friend had simply vanished into the Daytona beach night. The initial fervor surrounding Raina Whitcomb's disappearance could not be sustained indefinitely. The frantic searches, the exhaustive witness interviews, and the meticulous forensic examinations eventually yielded nothing concrete. Every lead, no matter how tenuous, was pursued with unwavering diligence, yet each path led to a frustrating dead end. Tip lines went silent, forensic analyses of the sandals revealed no actionable evidence, and the vast expanse of the ocean offered no further clues. The energy and resources poured into the case in those first weeks and months slowly dissipated, as investigators found themselves with no new avenues to explore. The initial hope, fueled by urgency, began to wane, replaced by a growing sense of frustration and helplessness within the investigative teams. The fundamental challenge remained Raina Whitcomb's complete absence. Without a body, without a definitive crime scene, and without any identified suspect, the investigation lacked a tangible core. It was a mystery without a focal point, a puzzle missing all its central pieces. Law enforcement could not build a case, could not identify a perpetrator, because the very elements required to define a crime were simply not present. Her disappearance was a void, an unexplained vacuum in the fabric of Daytona beach life, a chilling enigma that defied all conventional investigative methods. As the weeks turned into months, the story of Raina Whitcomb gradually receded from public consciousness. Local news reports became less frequent, then ceased altogether, replaced by new headlines, new tragedies, and the relentless churn of daily events. The posters bearing her smiling face, once ubiquitous in storefronts and community centers, faded and peeled, eventually removed by time and weather. For the wider community, Raina Whitcomb became a memory, a chilling local legend, but no longer an active part of the daily conversation. Within the police department, the physical manifestation of the case going cold was stark. Raina Whitcomb's file, once a frequently accessed and growing compendium of active leads and fresh reports, thickened with unanswered questions. It became a testament to the meticulous work done, yet also to the profound lack of resolution. Eventually, the file was formally moved from active investigati onto the cold case archive, a designated shelf among countless other unsolved mysteries. It sat there, a heavy binder filled with hopes and dead ends, awaiting a new piece of information, a fresh perspective, or a technological advance that might one day breathe life back into its pages. For Raina's family and closest friends, however, the case never went cold. Their pain was a constant, enduring presence, a wound that refused to heal without the balm of answers. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, each marked by her absence. The lack of closure was a torment, preventing them from fully grieving, from moving forward. They were trapped in a perpetual state of limbo, haunted by the image of her sandals beneath a bench, forever wondering what truly happened on that squall-swept night in Daytona Beach, carrying the heavy burden of an unresolved loss through years that stretched into a decade, and then beyond. 16 years had now passed since Raina Whitcomb vanished into the Daytona Beach night. Her case, once a frantic search, had long settled into the grim quiet of the cold case archive, a file among many, gathering dust. For over a decade and a half, the ocean had held its secrets, and the boardwalk had offered no further answers. The hope that once flickered had dwindled to a faint ember for all but the most devoted. Then, in the late summer of 2018, the landscape of Daytona Beach was violently reshaped. A powerful hurricane, one of the most destructive in recent memory, slammed into the Florida coast. Its churning winds and torrential rains brought widespread devastation, tearing at infrastructure and scouring the shoreline. The storm surge was immense, dragging untold amounts of debris from the land into the sea, and in turn, churning up the ocean floor, depositing forgotten relics onto the altered beaches. In the chaotic aftermath, a monumental cleanup operation commenced. Storm Operations Chief Deb McCall oversaw the colossal effort, directing crews to clear mountains of twisted metal, splintered wood, and vast quantities of seaweed that had been ripped from the ocean and hurled onto the sand. It was a painstaking, arduous task, sifting through the detritus of nature's fury. The focus was on restoration, on clearing the path for recovery, but the storm had inadvertently become an archaeologist, unearthing what had long been buried. Amidst the tangled, saline-soaked mass of seaweed and storm debris, a remarkable object was discovered. A cleanup worker, raking through a particularly dense pile near where the Main Street Pier once stood, felt something small and hard against the tines of his rake. He bent down, expecting another piece of broken plastic or shell, but what he found was different. It was a small, heart-shaped locket, caked in sand and encrusted with marine growth, its metallic surface dulled by years submerged in salt water. Tangled tightly in a knot of dark green seaweed, it seemed to have been violently wrenched from its resting place by the hurricane's fury. The object was carefully extracted, its details slowly emerging as the sand and salt were gently brushed away. It was undeniably a locket, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, with a delicate, almost ethereal quality despite its rough exterior. The discovery, seemingly innocuous, was reported up the chain of command, a curiosity amidst the devastation. However, a closer inspection by investigators, alerted to the find, revealed a faded, yet distinct, engraving on its reverse side, initials that resonated with a long-dormant tragedy. The locket was quickly and positively identified as belonging to Raina Whitcomb, a tangible, heartbreaking piece of her finally surfacing after more than a decade and a half, pulled from the depths by the very forces that had once seemed to erase her. The cold case had suddenly, dramatically, been reignited. The heart locket, small and unassuming, became the seismic event that shattered 16 years of silence. Its discovery amidst the hurricane's detritus instantly ripped Raina Whitcomb's case from the dusty cold case archives, propelling it back into the intense glare of active investigation. What had long been a symbol of an enduring mystery was now a tangible piece of evidence, a physical link to a night that had defied explanation. The locket was not merely a sentimental item. It was a potential key, laden with the hopes of a family and the renewed determination of law enforcement. This sand-caked artifact became the focal point of an entirely new inquiry. It was handled with an almost reverent care, its every surface scrutinized for the slightest clue that might have survived years of saltwater immersion and the recent violent churning of the storm. The locket was immediately transported to the forensic lab, where a meticulous examination began. Latent print tech Jasmine O'Neill, a seasoned expert known for her painstaking attention to detail, was tasked with the intricate analysis. She understood the immense challenge. The locket had been exposed to the elements for over a decade and a half, yet even the most microscopic trace, a stray fiber, a fleck of skin, or a faint print could be revolutionary. Using specialized techniques, O'Neill began her painstaking work, carefully cleaning, illuminating, and magnifying every millimeter of the locket, searching for any anomaly, any whisper of a past interaction preserved within its metal and clasp. Simultaneously, investigators revisited Raina's old case files. The thick binders, once closed and filed away, were pulled out, their contents reread with a fresh perspective. Original witness statements were re-examined, crime scene photos from 2002 were scrutinized again, and the initial theories, once exhausted, were reconsidered in light of the locket's reappearance. Every dead end from the first investigation was re-evaluated, not as a failure, but as a path to understand what might have been missed. The question was no longer simply, what happened to Raina? But what does this locket tell us that we couldn't know 16 years ago? For Raina's family, the locket's discovery ignited a powerful, if terrifying, surge of renewed hope. After years of quiet despair, the possibility of answers, however painful, was a lifeline. The community, too, felt the ripple of renewed interest, the chilling reminder of an unsolved disappearance now infused with the promise of resolution. This resurgence of hope, however, came with immense pressure on law enforcement. The eyes of Daytona Beach, and indeed the nation, were now on them, demanding that this new, critical piece of evidence finally unlock the truth behind Raina Whitcomb's vanishing act. The cold case was burning hot once more. Jasmine O'Neill's meticulous forensic examination of Raina Whitcomb's locket progressed for weeks, a painstaking process of elimination and microscopic scrutiny. The locket itself offered no direct fingerprints, its surface too degraded by time and oceanic exposure. However, deep within the intricate mechanism of its clasp, a minuscule, almost imperceptible residue was discovered. Under powerful magnification, O'Neill identified it as trace talc, a fine, powdery substance. This was not merely incidental dust. Its location within the closed clasp suggested it had been trapped there during a forceful, perhaps violent, manipulation of the locket. The presence of talc, while seemingly innocuous, became the first tangible thread in 16 years. Forensic chemists then undertook an exhaustive analysis of its chemical composition. Their findings were precise. The talc contained a unique blend of silicates and additives, a specific formulation that allowed for its targeted identification. This particular blend was not a common household product. It was a component of a specialized medical-grade powder, used to lubricate and preserve latex gloves, specifically those used in medical environments. Further investigation narrowed the field dramatically. This exact brand of talc was supplied to only one medical facility in the greater Daytona Beach area during 2002, a small, private clinic located several miles inland from the pier. The connection was electrifying. Investigators immediately shifted their focus to this previously unconnected clinic. Their first action was to request all available security logs and personnel records from the period surrounding Raina's disappearance in August 2002. The clinic, being a private facility, maintained detailed electronic and paper records, a stroke of fortune for the cold case team. Detectives methodically combed through hundreds of entries, scrutinizing shift changes, supply deliveries, and access logs for any anomalies. The search was painstaking, but eventually a peculiar entry emerged. On the night of August 14, 2002, the very evening Raina vanished, security logs indicated an after-hours access by a staff member. This individual, a male employee, had clocked out of his regular shift, but had then re-entered the clinic approximately 2 hours later, an unusual detour from his typical routine. The entry was brief, logging him in and out within a 20-minute window, with no stated purpose for his return. This unexplained after-hours visit, coupled with the unique talc, provided the first concrete link to a potential suspect. The clinic's exterior security footage from that night was then retrieved and analyzed. The grainy, low-resolution video offered no direct view of the staff member or his vehicle as he entered or exited. However, as he drove away, a critical, fleeting image appeared. For a mere second, his dark-colored pickup truck was captured, not directly, but in a distorted reflection within the polished glass of a neighboring building. The image was shadowy and indistinct, yet it provided enough detail, the make, model, and even a unique dent on the passenger side, to identify the specific vehicle, and by extension, the staff member who owned it. The 16-year-old mystery had finally yielded a face, albeit one seen only in reflection. The shadowy reflection of the pickup truck, coupled with the inexplicable after-hours clinic entry, provided investigators with the critical leverage they had sought for 16 years. The unique dent on the passenger side, though faint in the reflection, matched departmental records for a vehicle registered to David Miller, the clinic staffer whose unusual presence had been flagged in the security logs. Miller, now 47, was a longtime resident of Daytona Beach, living a seemingly unremarkable life. The evidence, though circumstantial, was compelling enough for a warrant. Apprehended without incident at his home, Miller initially denied any involvement in Raina Whitcomb's disappearance. However, confronted with the locket, the specific talc residue, and the irrefutable security footage, the meticulously constructed wall of his deception began to crumble. Under interrogation, David Miller eventually confessed to the events of that fateful August night in 2002. He had been on the boardwalk, a common haunt after his shifts, when he encountered Raina. A brief, seemingly innocuous conversation escalated into an altercation. Raina, recognizing him from the medical community, had rebuffed his advances. In a fit of rage and panic, Miller had overpowered her, dragging her from the boardwalk. The sandals, neatly placed beneath the bench, were a deliberate act on his part, a crude attempt to stage a voluntary disappearance, or perhaps merely an afterthought in his haste. He had then driven her body to a secluded stretch of coastline north of the pier, using his pickup truck, and disposed of her in the churning waters, the locket tearing from her neck during the violent struggle or the subsequent dumping. His after-hours return to the clinic was to clean himself and his vehicle, using the very talc-dusted gloves that would, over a decade later, become his undoing. The ocean, in its violent churning during the hurricane, had finally surrendered its secret, bringing the locket back to the surface, a silent witness to a long-hidden crime. For Raina Whitcomb's family, the confession brought a complex, agonizing form of closure. The truth, when it finally emerged, was brutal, confirming their deepest fears of foul play. There was immense sorrow in knowing the violent circumstances of Raina's final moments, a pain that would never fully dissipate. Yet, interwoven with this grief was a profound sense of relief. The gnawing uncertainty, the endless questions that had haunted them for 16 years, were finally answered. They could now begin the arduous process of true mourning, knowing her fate, and could finally lay her memory to rest with the dignity she deserved. The resolution sent ripples through Daytona Beach. A community that had lived with the chilling legend of the vanished nurse for so long could now reflect on justice being served, a testament to relentless police work and the unyielding power of forensic science. The case of Raina Whitcomb became a powerful reminder that even the coldest of cases can be rekindled, and that the dedication of investigators, coupled with a single, unexpected clue, can pierce through decades of silence. Raina's memory, once shrouded in mystery, now stood as a symbol of hope for other families awaiting answers, and a stark reminder of the enduring commitment required to ensure that no victim is ever truly forgotten.